Hey everybody, Qroo here. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably noticed that my approach to teaching Spanish isn't like everyone else's. And honestly, I think that's one of the big reasons why this channel just passed 200,000 subscribers. So first of all, thank you very much for that if you're one of those subscribers. And if you're not one of those subscribers, why not subscribe? Because like 200,000 people thought this stuff was pretty cool. So I'm just saying. Well, in this video, I want to talk about one specific thing that I do differently that has a huge impact on how fast you can start speaking Spanish, like having a conversation and actually using it in the real world. In order to explain this, I have to give you a little bit of background about Spanish, just in case you have no knowledge of Spanish. Well, in Spanish, there are two main ways to say you. There is tú, and that is the informal version, and there's a formal version, and that is usted. Well, I'll tell you that most courses and tutors will start you off with usted. They're going to tell you it's more respectful, especially in Latin America, where the language tends to be more formal overall, and that's what you should be using. And they're not wrong, but I don't start with usted. I do the exact opposite. I teach the tú form, the informal, first. And it's not that usted's not important. It is, and eventually you'll be using it. But when you're an absolute beginner, I can get you up to speed very quickly with the tú form. It's easier to learn, it's easier to use, and I'm going to point all that out in this video. I'm going to list all the reasons. But first things first. Let's talk about the big elephant in the room here, and that's those folks that are already like watching this and they're like freaking out and they're like, wait, Paul, aren't people going to be offended if I use tú instead of usted? Here's the truth, folks. They're not, okay? When you first start out learning a language, it's going to be very obvious to anyone you're speaking with that Spanish is not your first language. It's probably going to be obvious to them also that you haven't been studying it for very long. So for that reason, you're not going to be held to the same standards as a fluent speaker. What matters most at that point in your language learning is that you can communicate in the foreign language. And that's what the tú form is going to allow you to do. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been teaching it this way for many years, and I've never seen anyone get offended by a beginner using tú. People don't expect perfection. They're going to be surprised you can speak any Spanish at all. Now, as your Spanish gets better and you start to learn some of the more complex aspects of the language, then yes, you're going to start to move over into usted, and it's going to be easier at that point because you built this framework. All right. Now let's go into the reasons, the detailed reasons why tú is just easier to use. And here's a big one. You can always leave the word tú out of the sentence. So what am I talking about? Well, in Spanish, if it is very clear from the verb conjugation or from context who the subject of the sentence is, you can actually omit the subject and just have the verb by itself. Well, when you're using the tú form, it is always clear from the verb conjugation that's who the subject is, so you can always leave that word out. So if I want to ask you, do you speak English? I can drop the tú and just say, ¿hablas inglés? ¿Hablas inglés? And you might be like, okay, so why is that important? Would it really matter if I put tú in there? Well, when you have to put the subject in, that means you have to think about word order. And you're like, okay, does the tú go, do I say tú hablas inglés? Or do I say hablas tú inglés? Or is it hablas inglés tú? Where does it go? So you don't have to worry about that because the verb conjugation always tells us, so we could just leave it out. Now, let's look at usted. Let's say I was going to be formal and ask someone, do you speak English? And I'm just going to leave usted out. Habla inglés? It's not clear from that verb that I'm saying usted. And here's the reason why, okay? Let's go ahead and look at that verb, hablar. And it's conjugated here in the present tense. Now you can see right there our tú form, right? So tú, the informal you, is hablas. That ending can only belong to the informal. Now right below it there, that is habla. And that's where usted goes. But that's also where all third-party singular everything goes. He, she, it, the dog, the house, everything falls into that verb. So that means that the conjugation alone doesn't tell us who the subject is. So we might have to put it in. Now I have to figure out where usted goes because it has to be clear. Sometimes I have flexibility and it can go in front of a verb or after a verb, but sometimes I don't. For example, if I asked you, when did you go to the store? And I'm in the tú form, It's easy. ¿Cuándo fuiste a la tienda? Because I didn't have to worry about tú. Now, with the usted form, I got to think about it. If I just say, ¿Cuándo fue a la tienda? And it's not clear if it's you or were you talking about somebody else, the person's going to be like, ¿Quién? Who? So I have to figure out where that usted goes. Could I say, ¿Cuándo usted fue a la tienda? No, it has to follow the verb. And it's because it starts with a question word. And now we start getting into all these word order rules and things that we didn't even have to worry about because I just taught you the tú form and I told you to drop the tú and you're making sentences like this. This other reason for using the tú form is also a big one. And with this, I'm going to throw some grammatical terms at you. I know they intimidate folks. And we're going to be talking about direct object pronouns, indirect object pronouns, things like that. You'll see from the examples what I'm talking about. With the tú form, I only have to know one word, te. And let's look at some English sentences. I saw you. When you is the object, I only have to know te. I saw you, te vi. I gave you a gift. I gave a gift to you, is what I'm saying. Te di un regalo. Still just te. I gave it to you, meaning the gift. So, and I'll help you out a little bit. When I take the gift, el regalo, that becomes a lo, the it, and it goes after te. And I get te lo di. And you'll see why I did these three examples. So that's the tú form. I taught you one word, te. It's always te. Now let's move on to usted. Things are going to get complicated now because we have a lot of different words we're working with. Could be lo, could be la, could be le, it could even be se, and I'm going to show you here. And they're not interchangeable. So if I said, I saw you, and I'm talking to a man, that would be lo vi, but not le. Well, in some parts of Spain, they'll say le, but not normally. And if it's a woman, it'd be la vi. So I'm already having to think about that. So you're like, okay, lo and la, so where does le come in? Well, when I'm giving something to someone or taking something from someone, then that's going to be le. So I gave you a gift is going to be le di un regalo. You're like, okay, should I put lo? No, you'd have to know that's le. And look at this last one. I gave it to you, the gift. Remember I told you we take el regalo and it becomes lo. That's our it. And we're going to drop it in the middle in there. And that would look like le lo di. But you can't have in Spanish, right? When you have a lo there, that first one changes to a se, but you'd have to know that. And yes, indirect and direct object pronouns are a very complex aspect of Spanish. I have tons of videos on it to get you through it, but it takes time to learn it. And one day, if you stick with Spanish, you will. But if you're getting frustrated right out of the chute trying to use usted and all this extra thought, you're more likely to quit. People are like, I can't do this. But not with the tú form. What do we get? Te, te, te. Well, that was easy. No thought involved. I could probably just stop the video now because it's been a very compelling argument, but no. Here's another reason, and this is a big one, okay? In the past tense, when you use the usted form, you have to have, and I don't want to use the word perfect pronunciation, but you have to be very careful with your pronunciation. And since it's a brand new language for you, I mean, that should be pretty easy to do, right? Take a look at this. This is I speak, okay? Hablo, hablo. And if we just took our verb for you spoke with usted, it's the same, we just have an accent over the last vowel. Hablo. So you have hablo and hablo. You've got to really focus, otherwise it sounds like a completely different tense. And this does get confusing. Now, if you're popping in usted, then they're like, okay, I think you meant that one, even if your pronunciation's off. But if you left it off, it's not going to be clear, is it? Now with the tú form, you don't have that problem, okay? You spoke, hablaste, hablaste. It's very clear to the person you're speaking to, you're meaning you. And also, this is very easy for English speakers to say. When I show these words, you know, with this ending to English speakers, and I'm like, okay, how do you say this? They can figure out where to put the emphasis. They just naturally hit the right vowel. They're like, hablaste? I'm like, yeah, it's hablaste. Oh, okay, that's not that hard. Funny story, actually had this happen. I learned Spanish on my own, being a deputy sheriff in Central Florida. I worked in an area with a large, really large migrant population, most of whom were from Mexico. spoke Spanish only. I spoke Spanish all the time. That's how I learned it. And we had other deputy sheriffs who could speak Spanish. Most of them were heritage speakers. A heritage speaker is someone who, in this case, they grew up in the US, their parents spoke Spanish, and that's how they learned it. And some heritage speakers are fantastic at the language. They are great. They must have spoken it every day at home. Other heritage speakers, not so good. They can communicate, kind of function in the language, but they are lacking. Well, one particular day we had a shooting. I was a supervisor on scene. When I arrived, there was already a heritage speaker speaking to the suspect, so I let him speak. And he's using the USTED form, and he's confusing the guy for a couple of reasons, because you're talking to somebody who was involved in a shooting and they shot somebody else. So sometimes you're like, what did you do? What did he do? That kind of thing. And you're using the exact same verb tense for both. So that's already confusing him. If the officer left off USTED, you know, and he's like, ¿Y a dónde fue? Like, where did you go or where did he go? It's not clear. So the suspect the whole time constantly is like, ¿Quién? Who? ¿Quién? Who? This thing's going back and forth. It's just painful to watch. And at one point, the officer, like we talked about, it's very important you hit the stress in the right spot. Unless you stick USTED in, then they're still kind of getting it, but he didn't do that. And he said, and it sounded like this because he put the emphasis in the wrong spot. It sounded like he said present tense. Do I shoot the victim? And it was odd even when he said it in Spanish, but it's just because he didn't put the accent in the right spot. He didn't stick USTED in the sentence, and it just came out that way. And the suspect looked at him, he looked confused, and I'm looking at him like this, and the suspect goes, in Spanish, he's like, what are you trying to say? I shot him. Is that what you're asking me? Yes, I shot him. So, I mean, it was a good interrogation tool, but it was just painful to watch. At one point, I kind of pulled the deputy over, and I'm kind of like, just use the do form with him. Then it's so much clearer, even when you're talking about a third party. ¿Qué hiciste? What did you do? ¿Y qué hizo? What did he do, she do? Whoever else you were talking about. You could start dropping those subjects. It just makes it so much easier. So that is why I start out with the tu form with absolute beginners. It's just much easier to learn. It's much easier to use. It can get you up to speed quickly, and you can start to communicate, all right? Now, I'm not ignoring USTED. I do teach it later. But, you know, after you've started to learn the framework of the language and you're starting to be able to say things, you're going to learn more about those direct and indirect object pronouns. And you're going to learn, when is it lo? When is it la? When is it lay? When does it turn into say? That's going to take some time. But you've already been talking long before that. But once you learn those, hey, you can work in the USTED form, no problem. Now, if you like the way I teach, you like my whole approach to the language, I have a lot of material here on the free channel. I also have a private learning group. It's a paid learning group. That's why it's private, I guess, but anybody can join. It's called the Qroo Spanish Crew. I have exclusive content over there. I have an entire course from beginners that'll take you all the way through and build on each other, each lesson, get you up to speed. I have material over there for intermediate and advanced. You get personalized help from me and other group members. Check it out. I'll put a link to it in the description section and pin it to the top of the comments. Well, that's it for this particular video. If you enjoyed it, just do me a favor and give it a thumbs up. And until next time, hasta luego.